Right, we're going to have a look at our oil pump now before we put it back on the engine. So we need to take this plate off. It's held on with screws, and trust me, when you get to undo them, they will be extremely tight. Manufacturer recommends when you assemble it that you use a Loctite sealer. Now this pump here is called a girator or a gear rotor type pump. The inner gear is driven off the crankshaft, which turns our outer gear, and as they come around and mesh, that's where our oil pressure is created. Now the drive gear will have one tooth less than the driven gear to create our pressure situation. Now there's a couple of measurements we need to do here. The first one is the outer gear to the housing, the aluminium housing, and all we do is we get a feeler gauge, and there we go, probably a shadow. So we've got our feeler gauge in there. It's a nice snug fit, which is good, and that tells me we've got 0.004 of a mil clearance, which is what we need. The other one we do is where the drive gear point touches the driven gear, we need to check that clearance in there. And there we go, that one's good. And we go around and we check them all in case there's one that's got some damage on it. So far so good. Yep, so we'll check them all, but at this stage they all seem to be fine. Inside here is our pressure relief valve, so if we get an engine oil pressure fluctuations or increases, this valve's on a spring and it just moves up and down to control that oil pressure. Now if the oil pressure gets too high, what it does is the valve opens and it either puts the oil back into the intake side of the pump, which is down here, or it drops it back to the sump. Now the other check we need is on the cover. Our clearance here on the cover needs to be measured, so we get our straight edge or our little straight edge, we go across the gears and the housing, and just like we did our cylinder heads, we just pick and start with a feeler gauge, put it underneath it, hold it down. If you can't move it, go down, keep moving down till you can get one that goes under there. So that one feels real nice, and that tells me we've got 0.0015 of a mil clearance, which is fine for this application. If those measurements are out, we're basically going to get a new pump. There's no point. Price wise, I think they're $149. You wouldn't recondition it. We're going to put it back together. So this plate goes on. It's only one way it'll go on, as you can see. Well thought out. The manufacturer recommends that we use a Loctite product or similar to hold the gasket, or hold the screws in rather. For what we're doing, we're only going to put them together with our hand, with a screwdriver, and we'll just tighten them up tight. And we'll do an oil pressure check on the engine once it's started. So we put all 7 in, I think it is, 2, 4, 6, 7 of them, and we'll do them up tight. The other thing to note with this is this O-ring must be there when the oil pump goes back on the engine. Also, we'll flip it over. We should install a new cam seal. Whenever we've pulled this off, you would put a new cam seal on it. And just there is our timing mark, which is very hard to see on the engine.